Welcome to the Re-Review Podcast, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we have an immense love for the films of our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we are discussing Tremors, released in 1990, directed by Ron Underwood, starring Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, and Finn Carter. This movie tells the story of handymen using their wit to defeat some unknown underground creatures. Now, this is fair warning. We're spoiling a 31-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. This is Bobby's choice, so he'll open up the discussion this week.
Absolutely. So I picked this movie because it's been a long time since I saw it, and I do remember enjoying it. I don't think I had a chance to see it on the theater, but I think that it looks really great and it holds up. I wanted to touch on some of the things that I like. Obviously it's like a horror-ish, adventure-ish kind of movie that's kind of like a mystery, kind of monster movie that plays off on a lot of stuff that it's come before, like particularly Jaws is the most obvious thing, if you can go that way, where there's a kind of an unseen monster chasing. But I like the way that it was paced and the way that it went. It was paced really well with like the point of view shots, and I definitely liked a lot of the physical effects of just like the creatures going underground and like pushing things up and knocking things out of the ground, and you know sucking things up and spitting things out. And I like the puppetry and the all the interesting dirt pushing and rock pushing kind of stuff. And it was really interesting. All of the entirely took place in this really, I thought, like really interesting looking desert with mountains, and I thought it was really nice to look at. And I thought the cast was really, at first I was a little bit concerned that they were gonna like go a little too in the cliche with like the country bumpkins, where they were talking about women in the very beginning in the opening scene. But I thought that they all the characters ended up being pretty endearing, and I liked all of them. Some of the characters, like Michael Gross, like he was on TV for a long time as the lovable TV dad, and so it kind of like had a little bit of nostalgic happiness looking at some of those characters. And I thought that Reba Wilson, I didn't think that she was in many movies that I remember up to that point, but I thought that she did a pretty good job. And I even thought that the dynamic between Kevin Bacon's character Val and Fred Ward's Earl were going up against each other, kind of, friendly rivalry they had. And last thing I'll mention to open us up is the score, where I thought it was really interesting that it had this kind of like bluesy kind of harmonica opening music that I thought was really interesting before breaking into the more of the traditional like orchestral score. But hopefully that'll start us off in a good point. So Austin, what did you think?
You hit so many things. I don't even know where to go. No, I'm kidding. Actually, I was very happy you mentioned Michael Gross, because the whole time I was looking at him going, this dude looks familiar to me, but I cannot figure out where. So it was a lot of TV dad stuff that he did, huh?
Family Ties.
Family Ties. Thank you. Thank you. If I missed it, thank you. Yeah, seeing a familiar face was kind of good. I'm not gonna lie. I think when I first saw this film, I did not like it. I'm fairly confident I did not see it when it came out, and I think I saw it on maybe USA or some kind of TV rerun at some point. And even at that point, I believe I understood that it was already in a cult status, maybe, or that, it was something that people liked for some reason. And I watched it and I just said, "What? You don't even see the thing. Like, what? What is the point of this?" And they're not even, they're just big worms. Um, and I will tell you right now, I really enjoyed this. Now, to figure out what's changed in the probably 20 plus years since I saw it, I think and if you want to know something about me, I kind of love cheesy stuff, and this was high on cheese to me. It felt very made for TV, almost in a way, with the camera work and especially the music. I had mentioned that I felt this was a little bit like if it was, imagine you split it into maybe 3 episodes, and it was made for Nickelodeon. It felt like it could have been a bunch of kids running around doing the exact same thing. There was just this element of simple nature to it that I enjoyed, about it. You mentioned the music, and it was kind of disjointed that it went from that sort of hillbilly bluesy type stuff, and then you'd get the more serious, oh yeah, by the way, we're in a monster movie type music. And I did not mind that contrast at all.
I
It
read that they'd
surprised me at
had
first, but I like it.
I read that they had two separate composers, one for the happy stuff and one for the scary stuff.
And I mean, they were really different. It set a very different tone for the film, each time. And I'll talk about that scary piece. I guess I found the mystery of the creature worthwhile. I think I liked that it was hidden from us for so long, and even after you knew what it was, I was more than willing to give up the fact that there were so many shots where they were just running from dust. Like, what is that? Movies today, you're going to see the monster. It's going to be CG. It's going to be in your face. You're being told you're afraid of it. And here it was like, there's this thing underground and everyone's afraid. You know what? I'm here with you. The jump scares, I gave in. There was a couple of them I completely jumped at, and I was very, very surprised by that. So I definitely find that I came away surprised that I enjoyed this. Matt?
Yeah, this is actually a movie that I, probably have watched more than you guys have. As far as the last time I've seen it was probably within the last few years or whatever. I I definitely didn't watch this in theaters. I was probably 5 at the time when it came out. So I more than likely watched it on VHS or on TV like USA. I definitely remember this thing was on cycle on USA, back in the day, maybe even to this day, right? Where, it was going back and forth. And I know for a fact there was some stuff that was cut for TV, either for timing or for language or content. So, watching it in its original format, definitely makes a difference in some points. You can definitely tell that it was a more likely meant to be a rated R movie that they kind of trimmed down a little bit to make it more of a PG-13 friendly to get that mass audience. And, it doesn't really bother me. It does. I don't think there's anything in here that really required, that hard edge or whatever, where you had to have, excessive blood or nudity or, gore or anything like that. I don't think it was really required. The one thing that I really kind of noticed watching it again now compared to, watching it before was I've seen Quiet Place since then. And I've definitely noticed the similarity in the idea of like the concept, where, obviously in Quiet Places, you don't make a sound or else the monsters attack you. And this one, it's kind of similar where if you make any, noise or you walk on the ground or anything like that, that's how it finds you. And kind of like you're talking about like the T-Rex, you stand still and you're somehow invisible to it. And I think that kind of gives it that concept, right? Just like how Jaws did back in like the 70s, where, it probably made people afraid of, going into the ocean. It's the same kind of idea where like it just breeds this, I don't know, I guess concept or whatever, where, it's easy to understand to some extent. And I think it does play very well into the terror of it, I think, to some small fraction, I guess, because it builds on the tension whenever that the actors are surrounded, the characters are surrounded by these creatures, and if they do move, if they do make a sound, it's like right there. And I think they played it pretty well. I will say the one thing watching this again that really stood out to me is it very easily could have been a bad movie. Very easily could have been a terrible movie.
But in a way, isn't it sort of a bad movie?
See, that's the thing, right? Like, I think that if somebody read you the concept of it, like how you did at the beginning of this, if you just heard what the idea of it is, it's very easy to say this was a sci-fi movie that was thrown together for probably less than $50,000 or something, and you could easily write it off. This, to me, this is very much in concept the same as Sharknado. But where Sharknado, to me anyways, failed.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, 100%.
And and there is some joy in watching movies like that or whatever. But I think what helped this was the cast definitely helped it a lot. Like, Bobby said, like they could have all and they do fall into cliches. They do, there's not some, they're not immune. They're not fully fleshed out characters, but I think that the actors, to their credit, put a lot into their performances, and they're staring at a bunch of dirt, most of the time, having to act and pretend like these things are chasing them. And 90% of the practical effects they probably never really got to see because they're hand puppets and stuff like that or whatever. So they were really acting against dirt, really. And I'm not going to say that it was completely convincing. There was no Oscar performances in this, but they do make it work as an ensemble cast, especially Val and Earl or whatever, the rivalry / friendship between the two. The thing that kind of stood out to me was the fact that we didn't get they very easily could have started this kind of like Jaws, right? Where you saw one of the farmers get attacked, like the guy up in the tower or whatever. I can't remember what his name was, but that could have very easily been the inciting incident, right? Where that's how you start off the movie. And that's usually how you would start off a monster movie like this. But instead they started off with Earl and Val.
With and music and hey, we're buddies.
Exactly. Like, and like you said, it's kind of a strange soundtrack, but it turned that first 15 minutes from something that could have been very boring into something that had energy to it. And it kind of kept you invested in it until you started getting into the monster moments. Right. And I totally appreciated watching it. The pacing of this is pretty solid. There wasn't very many, lulls in the movie,
but it still feels cheesy.
Oh, no,
don't in on that with me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It totally is. And again, I feel like the reason why it's not cheesy bad is because of the way that they did their performances. And they did put some money into the design of the monsters and stuff like that. It could have very easily been an art project where somebody just got some model magic, molded a little slug, put, some horns on it and be like, there we go. That's it. Actually, that's probably what they did.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there was a few moments. It looked like stop motion, right? That they were using.
For sure. There was probably a lot of stop motion and reverse camera work in this for like, especially the tentacles. You could definitely tell there were some moments where they're pulling it in reverse.
I think that's one thing I like about this era, though, is that with the physical filmmaking, that okay, some of the artifacts of stop motion, like you could tell, okay, like this looks stop motion, but there's a lot of it where I was thinking, like, wow, did they actually like dig a giant trench in a desert, or is it something more sophisticated than that, or is it like forced perspective? And I was sitting there thinking, okay, like I'm not exactly sure how this was done, and I kind of like seeing that in a movie instead of just thinking, okay, like this is CG and it looks kind of cartoony.
We talk about these characters. I'm going to bring up the few that I loved. Bert and Heather Gummer are end of the world nuclear shelter fallout people.
Yes, I need to chime in real quick here. I think I said Reba Wilson, so I mashed Rita Wilson and Reba McEntire in my mind and created a new person that doesn't exist. I meant.
How dare you, sir? Reba McEntire is a legend. How dare you? I meant
Reba McEntire. My apologies to Reba McEntire and all the McEntire.
You must go buy all of her music now.
Yes,
and this movie.
I agree.
In 4K Blu-ray. I just love the idea of them because they were, in a sense, these outsiders that came into that little town, and they were actually just mocked for being these crazy people who have their little shelter. And they were already off in the corner in a place in the world that is off in the corner. And then when it came time for things to go down, I felt like John Wick happened. It was an arsenal unknown to most movies, and they unloaded on I'm going to call it a grub. Well, what was a gruboid? What did they
Graboid.
say? Graboid. They unloaded on that worm, that thing, like none other, and it was just fantastic as they went from gun to gun trying to figure out what's going to be the thing that actually puts it down. The other thing I enjoyed, which I guess I feel like coming back to Jurassic Park, the raptors, the grubs got smarter. They actually gave them like something. They got more menacing. It wasn't just that they heard sound and they were going to come get you. They figured out how to get you. oh, you're on top of the building? Well, we're going to tear down the foundation. Again, cheesy as hell, but friggin' fantastic.
They were going to be opening the doors next, and I thought that one thing that was pretty clever was how they had the continuing reappearance of the one Tremor guy who kind of tore off his tentacle in the beginning, and so they're like, "Oh, hey, it's Stumpy," and so like there was the constant reminder of, "Hey, there's Stumpy. Here's the same one." So I kind of liked how they had the were able to differentiate between some of them.
I wonder, it's actually kind of a good point bringing that up is one, it gives it a unique identifier so that you can, not get them lost amongst, the four or five of them that were in the movie. But I guess, a question, do you think that maybe there was a draft of this where they only had one, kind of like Jaws, right? Where there was only one creature, but then they felt that maybe they basically would have to make it invincible until the end. Otherwise, since they didn't have just one that allowed them to actually kill off, a couple of them in the process.
And
I
then
think not
create a connection to one of them.
Yeah, I think not having only one was a really good idea if they started off with just one. I mean, for one, just like how you mentioned, they could explode or have very many different ways to kill them. But also, I think just having more than one just adds a little bit more of stakes to it. Like, oh, they have maybe a moment of relief. Hey, we got him, and then like, oh no, we didn't. There's more than one, and it for all we know, it could have been. And I'm sure they explored this in the sequels, but there could be a infinite number of them, and that's pretty frightening.
So since you brought up the sequels of your own, I'm not going to talk about them because they're not the movie that we watched. But if I had to pick one thing if I had to pick a negative for this movie, it's not this movie itself. It's the fact that I know the sequels exist. I've only watched one of the sequels, but just looking at the cover art of the sequels and the premise of the sequels, I hate that they were made. I know
Wait,
that
so it goes full Sharknado.
Oh no, it's it's Fast and the Furious level of sequels.
They have various varieties of Tremors now, and some of them are like turkey runners, just like raptors, basically.
Oh, and they had didn't they have a version where they started to fly? So like they were no longer under the ground; they could fly now or something like that. Like it was literally like instead of evolving, I don't mind if something wants to kind of come out with a sequel as long as there's a good concept behind it. But you could definitely tell this was sci-fi movie sequel territory at that point.
I will be watching all of these.
Oh god. I'm pretty sure the movies aren't rated very well, but I'm pretty sure they're the kind of movies that if you have popcorn and a beer or something like that, you could definitely have an entertaining Thursday night or something.
How many times do you think when you have an actor come on, they also happen to be a musician, that their music has to be in the movie?
I go straight to Deep Blue Sea when you make that comment.
My hat is like a shark fin.
That's right. But hell, shit, I guess it did its job. But remember that fucking lyric, don't we?
I'm thinking of
those that don't know, that is
movies,
LL Cool J with the best rap lyric of all time.
I'm thinking of Men in Black.
I mean, also
Men in Black.
Wasn't there was the Romeo Must Die with DMX? I think didn't he have a song on the soundtrack too?
Probably did, yeah.
Yeah.
So remember, Reba's track was "Why Not Tonight," but I think we only heard it at the end. I think whatever song was playing in the scene when the doctor is taken was different, even though we initially thought maybe since it was country music that it was another Reba track.
I see.
I mean, I guess maybe it makes sense because then it might have, if you did recognize the voice, it would have kind of taken you out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They probably already would have had that kind of difficulty of having people disconnect that she isn't Reba McEntire, the singer. Because I don't know how many movies she had acted. Because she had a TV show, but I feel like that might have came after this.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much experience she had as an actress. And to be honest, she didn't do a bad job. I mean, there was a couple points where it's kind of strained acting wise, but for being a singer, she didn't do bad. She was doing about as well as the rest of the actors in this movie.
Is it weird that I wanted more science because it's called Tremors? Kind of wanted a little more of the geological survey action.
More
No? Okay.
seismology.
Yeah, just me over here. All right, that's okay.
Well,
I'll take a more serious science-based version of this movie, please.
I would, and that's that's the reason why, like, I would love to have seen sequels that had been better thought out, and somebody had actually, written a more solid concept for the sequels, because I would have loved, because this takes place, it's filmed in California, but it's definitely like a Nevada setting. I would have loved to seen, one of them got away or something, or there was more, and they ended up in, like, going towards Vegas or something, and maybe you do have, maybe not so much of a rough and tumble crowd, but maybe you do have scientists and stuff. But then I guess you end up in a situation where it's like, do you start going down the rabbit hole of, okay, we need to find out where they're from and what their origins are, and
Right. Well, I
yeah.
was exactly just thinking that. Where are they from? And I think even the characters kind of speculated about nuclear radiation and all that kind of stuff. And maybe with Nevada, that's the first thing you think about with, nuclear test sites and stuff like that, and refrigerators and stuff. But
Oh no, you went there. Oh no.
All I thought about was, unfortunately, Jurassic Park 2 and San Diego. So this is maybe tainting all of Jurassic Park for me as a whole, since these were basically T-Rexes and Velociraptors combined into one, and Jurassic Park stole everything from Tremors. I said it.
Steven Spielberg, gonna see him in court.
well, it seems like Tremors stole a bunch from Jaws, so maybe it was
There's nothing new under the sun, right?
Is it Anthony Chain
circular
backwards? Gonna go back to like the 1940s, and there was another movie that was almost exactly the same. Thomas Edison made the very first, version of this. So out of curiosity, like, obviously we've been glowing about this entire time, and my only real negative was the sequels, which has nothing to do with this movie. But did you guys have any negatives that stood out to you?
I think the reason I'm not really jumping at a specific negative is because I was willing to accept the shenanigans of this world that was presented to me. I think if you're going into this looking for something serious, that or maybe even a more heavy duty monster movie with a bit more fright or a bit more tension. Um, I guess that's my way of saying maybe it could be bigger. And this is like you talk about either how a sequel would be addressed, or maybe if this was more planned out. You mentioned at one point, Matt, the idea that this could have been done as a student film. Not high budget, not high concept. Pretty simple idea that they executed on in a way that I enjoyed, but imagine with a lot more money behind it. Hopefully not CG, but just a little more oomph. I almost like I'm thinking of The Thing, and that was a hell of a monster movie. And maybe this could be raised to the level. Maybe some people consider it on parody, but there was just a cheesiness to this that I enjoyed. So that's my way of saying, look, I still enjoyed it. Maybe a little more oomph. I'm trying to think of a negative. Yeah, I guess the acting, the music was totally just disjointed. It's
one thing
everything
that
I enjoyed about it.
one thing I kind of thought about a little bit was that it kind of fell into a lot of horror movie traps. Sometimes it's hard to have horror movies without these kind of things. If you want to consider this a horror movie, it's like Monster, but I guess it falls in that category where they don't have the ability to contact anybody in the outside world. They um are blocked off from everything. Their one road out is blocked. It's kind of like the before cell phone age where you say, "Oh, hey, let me call the military or whatever to have them come out," and it's like, okay, this whole movie could have been avoided if, someone had the long range radio or whatever, and
You wish they had a satellite phone.
yeah, something like that, and I feel like, these kind of movies fall into that kind of pitfall where, they're blocked off from being able to communicate with heavy artillery.
I mean,
The monster just trails off. Oh, they had a sat phone. Dang it.
I mean, you are right though. I mean, I don't necessarily see that kind of stuff as a negative, because if that were the case, then there'd be almost like never a horror movie, because usually it's the worst case scenario has to happen in these situations. Like, The Thing, right? It's the exact same. Incredibly isolated, no outside contact, very limited weaponry. Well, I was about to say very limited weaponry. There was an arsenal that somebody had, but not very effective for something that's under the ground. If these things were above the ground, this movie would have been over in like 5 minutes. It would have just sniped all of them from like a mile away, and that would have been it. But it does fall into those. Less than the setup is as much of an issue as I think. Like you said, in horror movies, people have to make dumb decisions. Why? Val and Earl kept going and stopping and going back and all this other stuff that was going on. After that first one, I would have been gone. I'm like, nope. I would have warned everyone and I would just be like, I'm out. I wouldn't have gone back. Like, hey, there's something over there. No, I'm not stopping.
And
we're going to Bixby.
You won't be in the next horror film. Matt, so given where we're at, your recommendation, what are you telling people today? It's 2021. What, should they watch this film?
If they've never seen it before, yeah, they should watch it. But like you said, go into it not expecting a serious movie or something that you need to have high expectations for. Just enjoy it for what it is.
Bobby.
Absolutely agree with Matt, 100%.
Yeah, I'm going to ride with you there. It is a fantastic film. Don't look for the world. Look for just good, wholesome. I dare said it again. Oh, but there was one F-bomb. Be prepared. Be prepared. Good, wholesome content.
The mother thumpers.
The mother thumpers are coming for you. As always, thank you for listening. And remember, running is what you do once a plan fails.